I'm sitting here now, in a house that feels like it's been waiting for me my whole life. But the scent of lilies from Aunt Beatrice's funeral still hangs in the air, a constant reminder of how I got here. It's strange how a moment can both heal and break you at the same time. This house, a sanctuary filled with my aunt's love and memories, stands in stark contrast to the place I called home a decade ago, a place where I was little more than a whisper in a room full of noise. My name is Eleanor Vance, but my life, the one I truly own, began the day it was supposed to end, when I was left on the side of a country road, an unwanted chapter in someone else's book. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. My journey here began 10 years ago. When I was just 8 years old, we lived in a small, cramped house in Greenwich, Connecticut, a place that always felt too full of everyone else's dreams. My two older brothers, Michael and Christopher, were the sun and moon of my parents' world. They were 4 and 5 years my senior, their lives a whirlwind of elite soccer practices, expensive music lessons, and tutoring sessions for the prestigious private schools they attended. My parents, Richard and Cynthia, spent their days ferrying the boys from one activity to the next, their evenings consumed by booster club meetings and planning sessions for their sons' futures. I was simply there. I ate the meals they put in front of me, attended the public school down the street, and wore the clothes they bought on sale. My presence was acknowledged, but rarely felt. I remember evenings curled up in my small bedroom, the sounds of my parents' enthusiastic cheers from Michael's soccer games echoing faintly from the TV downstairs, or the intense discussions about Christopher's college applications drifting under my door. I was always reading, always watching television alone, a silent observer in my own home. The truth of my invisibility became strikingly clear one sweltering summer night when I was 8. The heat was stifling, refusing to let me sleep. So I crept downstairs for a glass of water. As I passed the living room, I heard my parents' hushed voices. They were talking about money, a concept I understood only in the abstract, but the tension in their tone was palpable. "We can't keep going like this," Richard, my mother, Cynthia, murmured, her voice tight with strain. "The mortgage is crushing us, and with your hours cut at the firm," my father's sigh was heavy, laden with defeat. I know, 3 children. It's simply too much. We can barely cover Michael and Christopher's academy fees, let alone the tuition for their future Ivy League dreams. My mother's voice hardened. "We need a solution, something drastic, a chill, not from the cooler air downstairs," ran through me. "What are you suggesting?" my father asked, his tone laced with a desperate curiosity. "Your sister, Beatrice, has that sprawling estate in Arkansas," my mother mused, a faint hope in her voice. "She's been alone since her divorce, and she always asks about the children when she calls. Perhaps—" I didn't grasp the full implication then, just the cold knot of unease in my stomach. I slipped back to my room, trying to make sense of what I'd heard, dismissing it as just adult worries. A month later, summer vacation began. I imagined family trips to the beach or visits to the local park. But instead, my parents announced a road trip to Arkansas. Michael and Christopher, of course, were staying home for their elite summer athletic camps. It felt unfair. But there was also a flicker of excitement at the thought of meeting this distant Aunt Beatrice, whom my father rarely mentioned. The drive felt endless, a blur of monotonous highway. When we finally arrived at Aunt Beatrice's estate, my breath caught in my throat. It was magnificent, like something from a classic movie, with a grand, sweeping driveway, manicured lawns, and towering white columns supporting a vast porch. Aunt Beatrice emerged, a striking figure taller than my father, with elegant silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her sapphire blue eyes, sharp and intelligent, met mine. "So, this is Eleanor," she said, her voice clear and precise. But then a soft smile touched her lips, transforming her stern features into a picture of warmth. "Hello, sweetheart. I've been looking forward to meeting you for a very long time." She seemed strict, yes, but there was a genuine kindness in her gaze, a sense that she truly saw me. Not just a child in passing. My parents brought in my small suitcase, and we settled into a formal living room, sipping iced tea while the adults discussed mundane matters. I absorbed the elegant surroundings, the expensive furniture, the tasteful artwork. After what felt like an eternity, my father stood up. "Well, we should be going. It's a long drive back." I jumped up, ready to gather my things, but my parents exchanged a strange, knowing look. "Actually, darling," my mother said, avoiding my gaze, "you're going to stay here with Aunt Beatrice for a while." My heart began to pound. "How long?" I whispered. "We'll see," my father replied vaguely. "You'll have fun. Aunt Beatrice has cable and a huge backyard." A cold dread began to seep into my bones. "But when are you coming back?" I pleaded. "Soon, love. We'll call you." My mother rushed out, her hug fleeting, unnatural. As they walked towards their car, I ran after them, my voice choked with rising panic. "Wait, what about school in the fall? When exactly are you coming back?" My father merely called over his shoulder. "We'll figure it out. Ellie, be a good girl for Aunt Beatrice." And then they were gone. The car disappeared down the long driveway, leaving me standing alone in the vast emptiness of Aunt Beatrice's porch, more bewildered than truly scared. Aunt Beatrice placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Come along, dear. Let me show you your room." The room was a dream, larger than anything I had ever known, with a four-poster bed draped in delicate white fabric and its own private bathroom. Huge windows looked out onto a sprawling backyard, complete with a sparkling pool and a vibrant rose garden. Under different circumstances, I would have been overjoyed. "It's really beautiful," I told her, my voice still small. "I'm glad you like it," she replied. "Tomorrow, we'll go shopping for anything you need to make it feel more like home." That first week with Aunt Beatrice was surprisingly pleasant. She took time off work, devoting her days to me. We explored local shops, watched a movie at the old cinema in town, and she patiently taught me how to navigate her sophisticated home computer system. She asked about my classes, my interests, my friends, and for the first time, someone truly listened, asking thoughtful follow-up questions that made me feel seen, truly seen. But as the days bled into weeks, a quiet ache of longing for my family began to settle in my chest. Even though they had often overlooked me, they were still my parents, my brothers. I asked Aunt Beatrice daily if they had called. "Not yet. Sweetheart," she would say, her voice soft. "I'm sure they will soon." But they never called. Not that week, nor the next. As a month passed, a gnawing worry began to consume me. School was due to start back in Greenwich soon. "Aunt Beatrice," I ventured one morning, my voice trembling slightly, "I think I need to go home. School starts in 2 weeks." She set down her coffee cup, her expression serious. "Eleanor, we need to talk." My heart sank. "Are Mom and Dad coming to get me?" I asked, though a terrible premonition already answered the question. She took a deep breath. "No, sweetheart, they're not coming back. Your parents have decided they can no longer care for you. They've officially relinquished their parental rights, and I have adopted you." The words hung in the air, foreign and incomprehensible. I waited for her to tell me it was a joke, a terrible mistake, but she simply sat there, her eyes filled with a deep, resolute sadness. Tears welled up, not the angry, childish kind, but a profound, aching sorrow that stole my breath, my world. The fragile construct I thought I knew, shattered around me. My parents, who were supposed to be my constants, had simply given me away. "What about Michael and Christopher?" I choked out. "Did they give them away too?" Her answer was a quiet no. "They kept your brothers." That truth twisted inside me, a sharp, searing pain. They kept them, but not me. I wasn't worth keeping. I cried for 3 days straight, a torrent of grief and betrayal. Aunt Beatrice remained a steadfast, quiet presence. She brought me warm meals, fresh tissues, and sat with me in silence when I needed her most. She didn't offer hollow comforts or insincere justifications for my parents' actions. She simply allowed me to feel the crushing weight of my sadness. On the fourth day, I awoke with a newfound clarity, a quiet resolve blooming amidst the wreckage. If this was my new reality, I could either spend the rest of my life waiting for people who didn't want me, or I could build something new, something real, with the person who clearly did. Aunt Beatrice, I said at breakfast that morning, my voice still hoarse but firm. I don't want to think about them anymore. If they don't want me, then I don't want them either. And with those words, my new life truly began. Aunt Beatrice enrolled me in the local elementary school, which, to my surprise, I found myself preferring. The classes were smaller, the teachers more attentive, and I quickly befriended a girl named Sarah who lived just down the street. Aunt Beatrice was everything my parents were not when I came home from school. She genuinely wanted to hear about my day, listening with an engaged interest that was entirely new to me. She helped me with my homework, patiently explaining concepts until I truly understood them. She attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference. She bought me books, not just for birthdays or holidays, but because she noticed my love for reading. Her work as a financial director for a major corporation was fascinating. And sometimes, she would explain the intricacies of her role, illuminating the world of economics with clear, accessible terms. She taught me about saving my allowance, about the value of understanding costs, and how to make smart financial decisions. The years flew by, filled with good grades, a brief stint on the school's soccer team, and piano lessons. Aunt Beatrice and I settled into a comfortable routine, cooking dinner together most evenings and spending weekends watching old black and white movies. She would share anecdotes about my father's youth, though she rarely spoke of him as an adult. When I turned 14, she posed a question that startled me. Eleanor, would you like to visit your parents and brothers? I could arrange it. If you wish. I considered it for a mere 10 seconds. No, I replied, the word firm and unwavering. They never called, never wrote, never asked how I was doing. Why would I want to see them now? Aunt Beatrice's gaze was understanding. Sometimes people change. Perhaps they regret their decision. I shook my head, a quiet certainty settling over me. If they regretted it. Aunt Beatrice, they would have tried to contact me by now. It's been 6 years, and not even a birthday card. She nodded slowly, a hint of sorrow in her eyes. I suppose you're right, but I wanted you to know the option was there. That was the last time we spoke of them for many years. Life with Aunt Beatrice was good, filled with quiet contentment. She was firm about certain things, like academic performance and household chores, but always fair. Always genuinely invested in my thoughts and feelings. When I turned 16, our world shifted again. But this time, it was Aunt Beatrice who bore the brunt of life's cruelties. She began to tire easily, an insidious fatigue that slowly drained her energy, and her clothes seemed to hang more loosely on her frame. At first, she attributed it to work-related stress, but after several visits to the doctor, the diagnosis was delivered cancer. I remember the day she came home with the test results, her face pale but resolute. She sat me down in the same armchair where she had once broken the news about my parents. Eleanor, she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I have some bad news. I have cancer, and it's quite serious. The ground beneath me seemed to crumble once more. Are you going to die? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know yet, she replied, her gaze unwavering. But I'm going to fight it with everything I have. I'm going to resign from my position so I can focus entirely on getting well. My mind raced, consumed by practical worries. What about money, the house? She offered a small, reassuring smile. Don't worry about that, darling. I've saved plenty over the years. And I have excellent insurance. We will be fine. The next 2 years were the most challenging of my life. Aunt Beatrice endured rounds of chemotherapy and radiation, each treatment chipping away at her strength. Some days, she felt well enough for us to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but others, she was ravaged by sickness. I quickly learned to cook nutritious meals, to manage the house, to become her caregiver. The moment I received my driver's license, I took over her appointments, navigating the city streets with a newfound purpose. For a brief, hopeful period when I was 17, the cancer retreated, and we both dared to believe we had conquered it. But then, just around my 18th birthday, it returned, more aggressively than before. My 18th birthday was a quiet affair, just Aunt Beatrice and me at home. She was too weak to venture out, but she still managed to bake me a small cake and presented me with a delicate silver necklace that had belonged to her own mother. I am so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. Eleanor, she told me that day, her voice frail but clear. You are strong and smart and kind, and I know you are destined for great things. 2 months later, I graduated from high school. Aunt Beatrice, too ill to attend the ceremony, watched a video recording, tears streaming down her face as I walked across the stage. Her eyes, though clouded by illness, sparkled with unmistakable pride. A month after that, she passed away. I was by her side in the hospital, holding her hand as she simply drifted into a peaceful sleep, never to awaken. She was only 53. After Aunt Beatrice died, a profound sense of emptiness enveloped me. I was 18, suddenly alone in that expansive house, adrift and unsure of my next step. Fortunately, Aunt Beatrice's closest friend, Clara, stepped in to help with the funeral arrangements. Clara had been Aunt Beatrice's confidant since their college days and understood the depth of our bond. She contacted all of Aunt Beatrice's friends and former colleagues. Then, with a hesitant glance at me, she said she needed to inform my father, as he was Aunt Beatrice's only living sibling besides me. Do you want to call him, or should I? Clara asked, her voice gentle. Please, you do it, I replied, my voice flat. I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. Clara put the call on speaker, and I listened as the phone rang several times before my father, Richard, answered. Hello, hi. This is Clara Jenkins, she began, her tone formal. I'm calling about your sister, Beatrice. I'm afraid I have some very sad news. She passed away yesterday. A moment of silence stretched, thick with unstated emotions. Then, my father's voice, devoid of real grief, came through the speaker. Oh, I see, Clara continued, detailing the arrangements. The funeral is this Saturday at 2:00 p.m. at St. Andrew's Church in Little Rock. I can text you the address. My father's response was immediate, almost dismissive. Well, that's incredibly unfortunate timing. My son Christopher just received a major promotion at his company, and we're hosting a large celebration party this Saturday. The entire family is coming, and we've already paid for the catering. I stared at the phone, my jaw clenched. Clara's expression mirrored my disbelief, a mixture of shock and quiet outrage. I'm sorry, she said, her voice strained. Did you just say you can't attend your sister's funeral because of a party? Look, it's not just a party, my father argued, a defensive edge to his voice. This is a significant milestone for Christopher. He's worked extremely hard, and we've been planning this celebration for weeks. Beatrice would understand that family comes first. Clara's voice dropped, laced with a chilling coolness. Beatrice was your family. Richard, of course, she was, he retorted, but she's gone now, and the living must come first. Besides, Eleanor is there to handle things. Right, she's an adult now. Without another word, Clara ended the call. She turned to me, her eyes filled with a potent mix of anger and pity. I, however, felt no surprise, only a familiar disappointment. It was precisely what I expected. The funeral was a poignant affair. Around 50 people attended, mostly Aunt Beatrice's colleagues and friends from her church. Clara delivered a beautiful eulogy. Speaking of Aunt Beatrice's remarkable spirit and the profound love she held for me, I managed to deliver my own speech, my voice cracking only once, before the wave of grief threatened to overwhelm me. After everyone had departed, I returned to the silent, empty house. It felt impossibly vast without Aunt Beatrice's presence, the quiet echoing with her absence. I spent the next 2 days in a daze, adrift, trying to comprehend what I was supposed to do next. Should I sell the house, go to college, find a job? Aunt Beatrice and I had discussed college, but never the practicalities of my future without her. On the third day after the funeral, a sharp knock startled me. I peered through the peephole, my heart seizing at the sight. It was my parents, Richard and Cynthia, flanked by my brothers, Michael and Christopher, standing on the front porch as if they had every right to be there. I opened the door slowly, my hand trembling slightly. "Hi, Eleanor," my mother gushed, rushing forward with open arms, but I instinctively stepped back, putting distance between us. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice flat. My father pushed past me into the foyer, his eyes already sweeping the grand entrance. "We came to see how you're doing, of course. We're so terribly sorry for your loss." Michael and Christopher followed, their gazes darting around the meticulously furnished living room, taking in every detail with an unsettling assessment. "Nice place," Christopher murmured, running his hand along the ornate wooden mantelpiece, a smirk playing on his lips. "Really nice." My mother settled herself onto the plush sofa. "Making herself at home. We're here to support you. Sweetie, you shouldn't be alone at a time like this." I remained standing by the door, my arms crossed. Where were you 3 days ago, when I actually needed support, you know? At the funeral, my mother waved her hand dismissively, a practice gesture. "Oh, darling, you know we had Christopher's party. It was already planned. All the relatives were coming. We couldn't possibly cancel something like that. We're here now, and that's what truly matters. We want to take care of you." A bitter laugh escaped my lips, the first sound of amusement since Aunt Beatrice's passing. "You want to take care of me? Where exactly have you been for the past 10 years? "That's different," my mother retorted, her voice hardening. "You were living with Beatrice, and she was taking good care of you. But now that she's gone, you need your real family." "She was my real family," I stated, my voice unwavering. Michael, who had been quietly surveying the room, spoke up for the first time. "Look, we get that you're upset, but you're being overly dramatic. We're here now because you inherited all of this." He gestured expansively around the opulent room. "Mom and Dad are just worried about you handling all this responsibility on your own." "What responsibility?" Christopher interjected, a greedy grin spreading across his face. "Come on, Eleanor, this house must be worth what? $1 million, maybe more plus, whatever money she left you." "That's a lot for an 18-year-old to manage." And there it was, the true, unvarnished reason for their sudden appearance. My father, attempting a facade of serious concern, stepped forward as Beatrice's brother. "I am her rightful heir. I believe it's only fair that I inherit at least half of her estate. She left everything to me in her will," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but firm. "A will can be contested," my father declared, his eyes gleaming with ambition, "especially when it involves someone so young. You are simply not equipped to handle this kind of money and property." My mother nodded vigorously, chiming in, "That's why we're here. Sweetie, as your parents, we are your legal guardians. That means we can help you manage your inheritance responsibly." They watched me, their faces carefully sculpted into expressions of concern. But the thinly veiled greed in their eyes was undeniable. They thought they had me trapped, cornered. "Get out," I said, my voice quiet but laced with an undeniable authority. "Right now." "Eleanor, don't be ridiculous," my mother scoffed, her false sweetness vanishing. "We're not leaving. You need us." Michael and Christopher exchanged a glance, then headed towards the grand staircase. "We'll just pick out some rooms while you two talk," Michael announced. It was at that moment I knew I desperately needed help. I retreated to my room and found the business card Aunt Beatrice's lawyer, Mr. Albright, had given me at the funeral. She had told me to call him if I ever needed anything. I certainly needed something now. I dialed his number, and he answered on the second ring. Mr. Albright, this is Eleanor Vance. My parents just showed up at the house, and they're acting like they own the place. They won't leave. I'll be right there. Eleanor, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. Do not sign anything, and do not agree to anything until I arrive. 20 minutes later, the doorbell chimed. I rushed to answer it before my family could react. Mr. Albright, a tall, impeccably dressed man in his 50s who had managed all of Aunt Beatrice's legal affairs for decades, stepped inside. Are you all right? Eleanor, he asked, his gaze assessing. I think so, I replied, nodding towards the kitchen. They're in there, eating our food. Mr. Albright walked into the kitchen with me, his presence immediately commanding attention. My parents and brothers looked up from the elaborate sandwiches they were assembling, using Aunt Beatrice's finest porcelain plates. They had made themselves alarmingly at home. Good afternoon, Mr. Albright said, his voice cool and clear as he placed his worn leather briefcase on the gleaming marble counter. I'm David Albright, Miss Vance's attorney. Eleanor called me because she appears to be having some issues with uninvited guests. My father, Richard, puffed out his chest, attempting to project an air of authority. I'm Richard Vance, Beatrice's brother. We are not uninvited guests. We are Eleanor's parents and legal guardians. Mr. Albright's eyebrows rose ever so slightly. Legal guardians and what, precisely? Makes you believe that, my mother, Cynthia, quickly interjected. Eleanor is only 18, in Connecticut, where we reside and where she was born. One doesn't become a legal adult until 19. That means we are still responsible for her and her property. Mr. Albright actually chuckled, a dry, almost imperceptible sound. I see the confusion. However, Eleanor has not been a resident of Connecticut for 10 years. She has been a legal resident of Arkansas for a decade. And in Arkansas, the age of majority is 18. Eleanor became a legal adult on her birthday 3 months ago. He opened his briefcase, retrieving several official-looking documents. Furthermore, Eleanor's legal guardianship was transferred entirely to Miss Beatrice Vance 10 years ago, when you officially surrendered your parental rights. Even if Eleanor were still a minor, which she is not, you would possess no legal authority over her whatsoever. Michael looked genuinely bewildered. But she's still our sister, biologically? Yes, Mr. Albright stated plainly. Legally? No. Miss Beatrice Vance adopted Eleanor completely. You have no more legal relationship to her than any other stranger on the street. Christopher's face was turning a mottled shade of red. This is... What about the inheritance? Dad's her brother. He should get something. Mr. Albright pulled out another document. Crisp and official. Miss Vance's will is unequivocally clear and legally binding. She bequeathed her entire estate to Eleanor Vance. This includes the house, all financial assets, and all personal property. The total value is approximately $3 million. You could have heard a pin drop. My parents and brothers stared at him, mouths agape, their faces slowly draining of color. My father's face began to purple with rage. That's not fair. I'm her brother. Family should take care of family. You are absolutely correct, I said, speaking for the first time since Mr. Albright arrived, my voice calm and steady. Family should take care of family. So where were you when Aunt Beatrice was dying of cancer? Where were you when I was taking care of her? Driving her to chemotherapy appointments, holding her hand in the hospital. My mother, her voice now a weak whimper, tried to interject. We didn't know she was sick. You didn't know? I countered, my voice rising slightly, because you never called, never wrote, never cared enough to find out. You had 10 years to be family, and you chose not to be. Mr. Albright nodded subtly, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Eleanor, would you like me to explain to your former family what their legal options are? Please do, I replied. my gaze fixed on my stunned parents. You have no legal claim to this property or inheritance whatsoever. Mr. Albright stated, his voice resonating with authority. Eleanor is under no obligation to share anything with you. If you continue to harass her or attempt to pressure her into giving her money, we will pursue immediate legal action for harassment and trespassing. My father exploded, yelling, "This is ridiculous. We're her family. We came here to help her. You came here the day after her funeral." "Mister?" Albright said calmly, his voice cutting through the outburst. "After refusing to attend that very funeral. Your timing speaks for itself. We need that money." My mother was openly sobbing now. "Our house needs urgent repairs, and the boys want to buy their own places. That mister," Albright replied, his voice firm, "is not Eleanor's problem. Now, I'm going to ask you to leave this house immediately. If you do not comply, I will call the police." They left. Finally. I watched through the window as they scrambled into their car and drove away, a whirlwind of defeated fury, probably heading back to Connecticut to plot their next move. "Thank you," I told Mr. Albright after they were gone, the words a profound relief. "You're welcome, Eleanor," he said, a note of caution in his voice. "But I'm afraid this might not be the end of it. People become desperate when they believe large sums of money are involved." He was right. For the next month, their calls were relentless, the numbers changing each time, indicating they were using different phones or calling from friends' houses. They left voicemails, alternating between tearful pleas for forgiveness, declarations of wanting to be a family again, and thinly veiled sob stories about their dire financial problems. Michael called, claiming he and his girlfriend couldn't afford a house for their upcoming marriage. Christopher called, demanding money for a crucial business investment. My mother's calls were a torrent of guilt-ridden sobs about the mistake they had made by giving me away. I saved every single voicemail and text message, just as Mr. Albright had instructed. After a month of this persistent harassment, Mr. Albright had amassed enough evidence. He sent them an official cease and desist letter, a stark legal warning that any further contact would result in court action and a permanent restraining order. That finally did it. The calls stopped. I haven't heard from them since. Now, I'm in college, pursuing a degree in financial analysis, just like Aunt Beatrice did. I'm living in her house, which has truly become my home, a sanctuary of peace and purpose. I haven't touched the inheritance money, beyond what's needed for my tuition and essential living expenses. Aunt Beatrice taught me the profound value of financial prudence, and I am determined not to squander the incredible legacy she left me. Sometimes, people ask me if I feel any regret about not sharing the inheritance with my biological family. My answer is, and always will be, no. They made their choice 10 years ago when they decided I wasn't worth keeping. Aunt Beatrice made her choice when she took me in, loved me unconditionally, and gave me a real home. I think of Aunt Beatrice every single day. She taught me that family isn't merely about blood relations. It's about the people who choose to love you, who choose to stand by you, steadfast and true. When life becomes hard, she was my real family, and I, her chosen daughter, was hers. I'm excelling in my studies, building a good life for myself. I found a circle of close friends, and I'm dating a wonderful man named Daniel, who is studying engineering. I've shared my entire story with him, and he believes I made the right decision. And that, for me, is more than enough.